Paola, thank you again for sharing your ideas with us and for this excellent exchange opportunity that I hope is just the beginning of a long-lasting collaboration with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this. And bon dia to all of you. I'm very happy for this occasion. It's the last moment of a quite intense week, and I want to thank all the people that were following day by day all this amount of words, images, and reflections, and also thank you for the dialogue we could start. And also I would like to thank the people that could make this possible, so especially Denise, but also all the people that could be with me during the different afternoon. I cannot say all the words, I would for sure exclude someone, but for sure Paola, Carlos, Pablo, and many others. So thanks so much for this occasion to discover Rio. This is my first time in Rio. I was in Sao Paulo, but not in this incredible city. And I'm really grateful for this occasion. So today I would like to conclude the cycle, or I will excuse myself with those people that were yesterday. You will see a couple of slides that are the same, but just to introduce the point, which starts from the last book I have published, The Biopolitical Garden, Space, Life, Transition, where I'm interested to understand the new centrality of life, the theme of life, in the debates and in the design about cities, territories, and I would say also architecture. Of course, we are in a moment of heavy, deep rediscussion of the fundamentals of our living together, living with others, in a context of radical change. And I think that in this moment, the relations between life, space, design, and of course forms of power are again at the center of our work. I can say this in a different way, that the socio-ecological transition is a moment of reconfiguration of a biopolitical project. This is eventually also without our contribution. I think it is coming, is finding, say, new themes, new questions, and being re-elaborated. And of course, as a designer, my point is, what is our role? Are we there? Are we not there? And I think it's quite fundamental interrogation about also the reason of being architects, urbanists, landscape architects, etc. So the book has been published in 2023, so last year, end of last year, in Italian and in French, and now in September this year there will be also the English version from Akhtar. So the question of space, so how space is inside this rediscussion of the relation between life and power, biopolitics, is I think a quite heavy question, because today we live in a condition where there is already a form of biopolitical space, so the result of this interconnection between power and life. And we should maybe make more clear this aspect, what kind of biopolitical project is today active. Is it something we recognize ourselves? I mean, we share. Because I think the biopolitical project of today has forgotten certain aspects of the modern biopolitical project, in particular the question of emancipation is not anymore at the center of design. So I think that this is a very crucial point. And I'm interested to develop reflections on a possible affirmative biopolitical space. I'm not alone in imagining that inside this category of biopolitics, not everything is is negative, not everything is just a possible criticism, but there is a possibility of imagining a kind of affirmative type of biopolitics. This is, for example, the position of Roberto Esposito, an important Italian philosopher. And it's a very ambiguous, narrow kind of path, because you always risk the negative side of biopolitics, but still I think that it is fundamental to understand this transition we are going in. So when I use the term biopolitical garden, and I will come back at the end, I imagine, for me, it has been a mental space, a mental place. At the same time, I work concretely on spaces. So, of course, I test and I recognize this aspect, this biopolitical centrality also in the everyday life, in the everyday professional also life. And this is a way to reflect on what's happening, and this transformation we are going through. The book, in synthesis, is made of 3 parts. There's the first part where I had the need to go back to the modern space and to understand the biopolitical dimension of the modern space. Yesterday we already did a very, in synthesis, I will remake the exercise. If you look at this collage, this is a collage of 1 century ago. You see the idea of modern city. The modern city is occupied by bodies that are almost naked. They move in the space not in regular way, not in normal way, but in a quite free way. No? They touch each other, they are together. We have also a woman that is in short. 1 century ago, that was not so evident. We have also a man that is dressed and is just smoking. So he's not working. He has a kind of leisure time, a moment of rest. So the idea of rest, not just of working or being exploited, appears in this collage. And the city is completely suspended, so no impact of the built environment on the natural environment. That was a utopia, of course, that shows some limits. In any case, you see that the green carpet is crossing the building, and even the small watercourse can go through a building. So here you see really the dimension of this utopia, where modernity was a way of imagining a specific coexistence, a specific type of biopolitics, with these bodies moving freely, having free time, and nature being combined without conflicts with the city. This just to say that when we see the modern city today, we have to remember that behind those images, and of course Rio offers some interesting moment of reflection on the modern architecture and modern urbanism, there was this idea of relations between bodies, so life, space, and power. So I had the need to come back to re-understand this kind of fundamental aspects of the old modern city. The second part is more theoretical, in the sense that I go really to some concepts related to biopolitics, and I try to use this hypothesis of the social and ecological transition as a new biopolitical project, as a theory building design. So I'm not interested to know if it is true or not true. I'm using as a tool to test, to go really to, like when you have something cutting through, and that can give you the possibility to better understand a certain aspect, clarifying this new centrality of life in all different forms of life, human life, not human life, different types of populations, in an investigation about future urban space. What you see here is a project we have realized some years ago in Antwerp. Is the theater plane, is a public space in front of a theater, and what is interesting is that you can really use this space as you like. You have a big roof that is high as the theater, so it's a kind of open space that is a cube of air, And you have a lot of things happening. Kids playing, they bring the schools there, they have the special furnitures with wheels that can be put outside so the kids can use just have a bigger blackboard of the surface. But it is also a place for performances. Here people are playing a famous movie, Dogville. So they have designed Dogville on the surface. It's also a place where people are dancing because there is also the ballet school. So, and there is a market, a very important market, Saturday and Sunday. So the market use also the covered space. It's a space for everybody, let's say. It's all the waters are collected into the garden that you see there. So all the water coming from the sky goes into the columns and then is brought to the rain garden that is at the end of this slope. Behind the rain garden, there are a lot of cafes that were the horrible cafe, really most degraded spaces, and now they have been requalified, and all the teenagers like to meet there. So this type of space is a space, I think, in which we can find several interesting reflections about life, about social relations, power relations. At the same time, this ecological transition is asking more than that. It's asking us to reflect, let's say, broader and deeper on certain concepts we use when we design. So I would like to touch some of the themes that in the third part discuss really projects. So I use my projects as a way to reflect on the previous questions. And I will stay on two chapters, prototypes of the transition and design horizontal metropolis. Here you see an image of the beautiful big space we were given at the Biennale in 2021 in Venice. That was titled the Biopolitical Garden. It was already there. So the first chapter is, I want to use a series of projects I have developed in Geneva, around Geneva, so in Switzerland, a very specific place. Of course, there is no idea of, say, using Geneva as a model for all the world, that we know, unfortunately, is not possible. But there are some interesting, maybe, questions to be discussed also in general. So first of all, we put soil and labor as the fundamental lenses to look at a quite big metropolitan area that is between two nations, because it's partially in France, partially in Switzerland. And the idea is that today, when we start to look at metropolitan areas, soil is a fundamental topic. The transformations of soil, the capacity, the functionalities of soil are fundamental, together with work, how we work, how we will work in the future, how we use the territory through the question of work. And we put for the first time, in a quite explicit way, prototypes of the transition, a new biopolitical project. Of course, the reactions, so the occasion was an interesting moment of reflection on a vision for this territory, similar to the Great Paris. So, following the influence of the Great Paris moment in 2009, there was the idea to have a moment of reflection on this metropolitan region, and 7 teams have been selected, and I propose to work with a research center we had founded some years ago, the PFL, Habitat Research Center, that is centered and focusing on urbanization and all the relation between urbanization and this social and ecological transition. So we participated as a research center together with different colleagues or different experts, etc. So what is specific in this metropolitan region is very polarized. All the jobs are on the Swiss side, and the Swiss side is not so big. The canton of Geneva is very small, it's one of the smallest in Switzerland. So the canton of Geneva cannot solve all the problem of this hyper-attractivity, because they have a lot of jobs, well-paid jobs. This is the reason why all the housing not all, but a big part of the housing, especially the new housing, is on the French side. So the French side becomes a kind of dormitory for the very attractive Swiss side. So you have a lot of commuters and all the problems related to commuting from one side to the other, public transport, car use, etc. An interesting point is that during the pandemic, in Switzerland, the 50% of the active population could work from home. This is a very high target. In Italy, for example, it was around 35%, so 50 is really a lot. And when you think about 50% can work from home, you are already imagining a revolution in the way in which the city, the territory are used, because you change completely the movements, the flows, the way of using your house, etc., etc. I don't know what was the case in Rio, but I would like to know what kind of percentage, more or less, or in Brazil. Of course, this region has the same problems you can find in many other parts of the world. Climate change, so here you see this map put together all the different aspects that are related to inhabitability. Will we inhabit in the future this territory, or it will become non-inhabitable? That's a fundamental point we have, both with the heat waves or with the floods. So you see, for example, the heat waves, the red clarify where are the places, the cities, but also alpine valleys. That's interesting. It's not only a problem of the city, not the heat waves, it's also because of the geomorphology, the way in which the valley is made, that there is no ventilation, you have a lot of hot days that are there, but also the floods, also the instability of the hills and the mountains. I mean, all the different things that compose an idea of risk that is different from the past. So, in general, we have more risk. But it's also important to understand what type of city is this. Because when we say city, now everybody thinks that not to have understood, but in fact this city is made of villages. Yes, there is Geneva, but all the rest, let's say 50% of the population, lives in very, very small nuclei, villages, even smaller than villages. And that's a specificity. You see, there is a kind of very regular pattern of very small villages. And today we are in this situation in which the gray and the black is the urban, so centers and peripheries. And the blue and the orange are villages that were losing population until a few years ago, and villages that were always gaining population since, I don't know, 1 century. So the point is that today we are at this kind of half-half. What is the problem? The problem is that all the planning activities, all policies, are thought for the 50% gray and black. So you only conceive the city, and everything is designed in function of that traditional city, while in fact the urbanity, the urbanization, is totally different. And all the people that have to move by car because there is no public transport, etc., they live in the villages or in the spread out kind of situations. So first of all, we have to change our perspective. We have to take care of urbanization and not simply of what we consider the city. The second fundamental aspect is the question of the soil, as we said. So in fact, the soil, this is not all the Great Geneva, it's just the canton of Geneva. You always recognize the lake and the shape of the lake. And what was discovered by looking at this urban soil or urban soil, something that made the pedologists completely astonished, was that the urban soil, not the soil that is covered by buildings, but the soil that is open in the city, in between buildings, is about the 30% of the canton of Geneva, which means that is more or less the same scale as the agricultural soil, and a little bit more than the natural milieu, so where you have a forest, pieces of more say, natural areas along the rivers, etc. So in fact, this urban soil is 1/3 of the global soil. Is not a kind of marginal entity. Pedologists have never been studying urban soil. They are starting now in these really last years. Of course, they don't like so much to study urban soil because urban soil is very complicated, much more complicated than the rural soil because you have stratification, you have pollutions, transformations. This is making the urban soil very complicated, but the urban soil is fundamental to look at some of the issues of this ecological transition. The space you need for water, so you need to have a place where you can infiltrate, so you need soil that can infiltrate, or you need more biodiversity. We are destroying biodiversity everywhere, so you need... well, there are many functionalities of soil that are crucial for the city of tomorrow. And the first thing is to recognize that the urban soil is not a lost dimension, but is something that can be part of all these strategies. In fact, it's really a hidden resource, hidden because we don't consider it. But in fact, you can imagine landscapes of infiltration, landscapes of connection, landscapes for circular economy, landscapes of continuities, etc., etc. So there are many different things you can do with this soil. Another fundamental change, say, of position is to look at the existing city. So this is mainly Geneva and the canton of Geneva. In a research that was made by one of the colleagues that were participating to this vision construction, this is the embodied carbon in the buildings. So, differently from what you can think, is not that there is the most of the embodied carbon is not in the center of the city, but it is in the periphery of the city. So the kind of yellowish, orange and red that are in the periphery of the city is where the most carbon is embodied, where you have also the higher embodied energy, the gray energy. Which means that if you want to work with energy, with the existing energy already there, you have to work with this periphery. And you should not expand. That's something we are now more or less ready to accept. But we have to reuse that embodied energy. Which means that the concrete, fundamentally, the concrete is the yellowish part. And is where you have the highest carbon footprint. So there is where you have to work. So we start to understand that the project of the city of tomorrow is exactly the yellowish part and not else. Another interesting aspect is related to the hard infrastructure, so the mobility, the transportation infrastructure. Again, another surprise. 1 century ago, 1925, that was the mesh of trains in black and tramways line in red. 2020, so it's a kind of desert. Now they are reintroducing some new tramway lines, some new train lines, but the difference is amazing. I would like to do the same exercise also for Rio. I think that there will be some surprises or interesting aspect. And of course, the vision is let's remesh this territory through public transportation, which means in some cases reopen old railway lines. Sometimes you have to reconstruct lines that have been dismantled, and so on. So this hard infrastructure is a very crucial point because some of the new lines are imagined going through the agricultural land, and by this there is a problem that is created because it's generating pressure on the agricultural land that are protected, and there are lot of protests and manifestation against those projects, and we are arriving to the paradox that we realize tramway lines along which we cannot do anything because we are inside agricultural land, and correctly you should not make this line. Finally, if the public transport is about this hard lines that have always structured urbanization, at least we think that they structure urbanization, I think it's enough to come to Rio to understand that the favela are not following the transport lines, so that is not true that the transportation lines are structuring urbanization. There is a lot that is also structuring urbanization, maybe in different ways and with different characteristics, and this model we have realized also with the students is trying to give a kind of identity to each part of the territory, including, for example, the rivers, their watershed, some mountains that they play a fundamental role in orienting space. You recognize this territory thanks to the presence of those elements. Something that for me is a way to represent the idea of a territory subject. So a territory that is not an object, that is not just something to be exploited, but a territory that is territory I use in the continental Europe sense, not in the Anglo-Saxon. So it's not just a question of perimeters of power, but is the physicality of our land, of our space. And you can recognize that really each one has different sense, different opportunities, different characteristics in the territory. All this has led to this reflection on weak infrastructure, not just on the strong, hard infrastructures that we consider the only one that can play a role in urbanization, but on rethinking weak infrastructures. Why weak? Because they have been manipulated. Take the rivers, for example, the water courses in general. They've been violated, they've been destroyed. I mean, all this type of things that are part of our territories, and normally they don't have the strength not to be there. So they are weak. And we think that there is so much to be said about this weak part of the territory, and that its capacity to be to organize this contemporary space and the future space. And for example, in this work we did after for the Canton of Geneva, we are really working on this idea of continuity at the metropolitan scale. I think that the question of continuity in space is fundamental. Just to bring the idea that you can go from here to there, that there is not the impossibility, that you can, you human as well as other entities, you can use the territory. Again, if you take Rio, the question of continuity is very important, no? The possibility to connect and to go from one side to the other, to go through and not to be rejected, I think is a crucial aspect. And here we follow water, fundamental component, which is also the possibility to reflect on climatic regulation, on all types of active mobilities and accessibility, on the concept of One Health, that is another World Health Organization is proposing, to consider that there is not just our health, but we are all together inside an idea of healthy environment, so kind of general well-being, using agriculture as a continuity tool, having the possibility to diffuse and to strengthen biodiversity, but also including social fragilities, social economies, and imagine that this ecological infrastructure can be thought as a social infrastructure as well, which means that going through the territory you find a lot of marginalities. Could be the refugee camp, could be the, I don't know, an old industrial area where people try to live inside. You find a lot of different things that can be reconnected or making part of this continuity, reinforcing coexistence of heterogeneous socio ecosystems. So the idea of this agency of weak structures and their capacity to organize a contemporary extended urban space. So we are talking of scales that is not the traditional urban scale. And imagining this space as an opportunity for testing the transition, so the different strategies that we relate to the social and ecological transition can find in this space a possibility to be tested. That's at least the way in which we have presented, where you speak of soils, you speak of vegetation, you speak of landscapes, you speak of water, etc. But you speak also of, you can localize and find all these different types of social infrastructure, social fragilities, and you make of the two things one project. And this is also very difficult because you have to put together, even simply at the level of the city services, no, they don't discuss together, no? So you just have to put together those that are looking at sport activities, social infrastructures, libraries, those that are looking at poor areas, those that are looking on to ecological water management, etc., etc. So a lot of people that never speak together, and that's already something very, very interesting. And for me, this is also a way to change scale. No, it's not just a big territorial map, but you go close and you find, you can individuate all the possibility of regeneration. So this part of the city where we should work with reusing or adding small things and reconfigure public spaces, reconfigure economies, reconfigure accessibility. This is really putting together open and built strategies connected by this idea of socio-ecological continuity. There is something in the back. There was a famous plan by Braillard, that was a famous architect, Braillard and Bodmer, in 1936. It was a moment of very leftish government in Geneva, and they proposed to mesh the territory of the canton of Geneva, so not only the city, but really also the agricultural land, with a system of, they were using the term surfaces, public surfaces. That was very interesting because both the city and the non-city, they were connected by these public surfaces that were not just open space, but also some villages, some heritage elements, some different occasions for equipments. Everything was put together by this mesh, and rethinking this idea, enlarging to the Great Geneva, we were proposing to regenerate punctually this territory through this more general idea that is also related to a reading of the topography, reading of the waters, reading of the different types of landscape. And making a lot of exercise, we were also engaging students in this work. We brought different ideas about circular and social economy, living soils, grey energy and reuse, decarbonization of the city, etc. After that, that was the beginning of 2020, around 2019, 2020, we had the chance to be selected this time as our office to work on a part of Great Geneva. So Great Geneva was divided in 4 pieces. The agglomeration plan was under construction and 4 teams were asked to work on each part. So we were working on the eastern part. Geneva is just in the lower part of the lake, so this eastern part that is a place along the lake with mountains, etc. And this idea of the territory subject was really fundamental to go deeper, let's say, in this description of the different territorial morphologies and landscapes, and listening, and this is something to which I put a lot of attention, this listening at the same time to the landscapes and the people. No? So listen to the landscape means really look and trying to understand the logic of the different parts of this territory. Here you see, for example, you have a drained land that are cultivated. You have this plan inclined towards the lake. You have the wet valleys that are kind of in between the 2 chains of mountains. There are really, what you see there, the first image is the white mountains, the Mont Blanc. You see there, it's really blanc. Even in summer, it's really white. The presence of these isolated hills and the moraines the terraces and the lines, the high lines on the slopes, the sloping inhabited areas, etc. And this was a way to construct this idea not only of agropolitan territory. Maybe some of you remember in the 70s what term was used by Friedman, but agro-hydro-silvopolitan territory. So in fact, it's a metropolis, no discussion about that. But at the same time, we have a lake, we have a lot of waters, a lot of wet areas, we have a lot of forest, and we have also people living there. And this we did together with listening to the people. But listen to the people was made in this way. We made a mapping of all the seeds of the transition, associations, movements, individuals that were already proposing this kind of transformation of agriculture, transformation of social infrastructures, transformation of urbanities. So putting together all different groups of people, and then we met them, trying to understand exactly their positions and to see what kind of strategies could be discussed and eventually shared with them. Because for us what was important was to rethink this type of urbanity, this dispersed type of urbanity that has some historical roots. You have castles, you have middle-aged villages, but of course it has been transformed in the recent time. But how they transformed? There was few cities and a lot of very small nuclei without any degree of urbanity, of infrastructure, etc. Simply it was added, I don't know, a new neighborhood of single-family houses with garden. That was the normal operation, without thinking the question of what is the city, what is urbanity. Just putting people living there, no? People that are mainly dependent on the car, because there is no way, of course. No? You imagine all these small dots that were pre-existing, you just add a new neighborhood of single-family houses with a garden, and then, of course, there is not even a bus that is going there. No? So they have created very strange urbanity that doesn't work at all. And all the services, commerce, etc., they are along the main roads, like a little bit the commercial strips, which means that in the rest there is nothing. It's just a monofunctional. And this is a very bizarre idea of how to make a city or how to construct urbanity. And it is not easy now to solve the problem because, in fact, you have everything separated. The only places where you can imagine to reconstruct some centrality in terms of urban function, mix of urban functions, are the commercial and the industrial platforms. So those become, we propose, to consider that the transformation was to be started there. And it was quite interesting that towards the end of our work, the French state launched a process on how to rethink exactly this type of areas, because it's evident that you have the doctor that is in the commercial platform, in the industrial platform. The doctor is not in the village or is not in the city center, is there. So this means that really you have to reconceive those spaces in function of an idea of centrality that does not exist today. There is another interesting point, is that these people, I said that is a polarized metropolitan area, so I'm talking of this eastern part, they are really not really so much interested to this Great Geneva belonging. And they are very careful, the mayors especially, about the fact that they are treated. Sometimes when I want to make the Geneva people nervous, I say you are colonizing, no? You are acting as colonizers. Because you bring there a new, very performative, with a very high performance train line. You pretend to densify around the train stations with neighborhoods that are dedicated to people that are going to work in Geneva. So you use the French territory just to solve a problem that you don't know how to solve. And what is also quite interesting is the fact that they have chosen along this railway stops that are all in wet areas. So we said, in fact, your idea, no? So the hard infrastructure, train lines, stations, you densify around the station, not the classic of urbanism, TOD, etc., doesn't work because you are in the wetland, the most precious wetland of this region. So you see how this abstract idea of urbanism that doesn't consider the territory as a subject, very easily at a certain moment you discover that it cannot work. In any case, it was very interesting, the discussion with the mayors. The mayors, this is something that I will say later. The mayors were very interested, and that's what they asked. Okay, you want to give us one new inhabitant, then I want a new job, and I want a new social infrastructure. So you, Geneva, are asking us to be your dormitory? No. If you want, we accept some of your new inhabitants, you give us also employment, jobs, and also some infrastructures. And I have to say, I was agreeing with them, because that's the only way in which you can make a resilient territory that is not totally dependent on another one, where you have no jobs, for example. And workplace, in fact, workplace. Okay, so we can restart. I hope that the people online can also follow. I saw that there was also Ana Carla, my Brazilian PhD student. She was also online. Hello, Ana Carla. You're there.
You are safe. You have to say Ana Carla. I am very safe.
So, as I was saying, the discussion also with the mayors of this part was very interesting in revealing this tension between the two sides, the political tensions between the two sides, and the question of territory being crucial inside it, and the idea of thinking, of course, in this fragmented situation. You cannot imagine not to distribute everything everywhere, but you can work on the idea of constellations, where you work on networks that can share certain services or certain amenities, at the same time reinforcing the continuity in the territory with this idea of socio-ecological infrastructure, and then the project of a diffuse regeneration that has to be adapted to each typology, each type of tissue, etc. That were the main lines. And then we propose a series of federative projects, because of course in this idea the territory subject it becomes also the one that can connect the different parts. And we proposed, for example, to imagine this strip of wetland, that is in fact close to the railway, where there was this idea of expansion of cities, to, on the contrary, be the space, the federative space of a series of different municipalities that you can see are on the slope, connected by this system of watercourses, where already the schools, some of the social infrastructures are close to those strips, and to imagine this as a type of project that can connect also the two sides of the border. Like, for example, this one. This is a big forest, and around the forest we have a lot of very small villages, and the space between the existing forest and the villages can be imagined as a space where to explore the type of agriculture that could be more coherent with the new climate, the drought, the needs we have today. And again, this is transborder, so you can work with the two sides, and you can define certain economies related also to the exploiting the presence of the surface, reorganizing, of course, also the public space towards this common forest. Or a space in the case of one small center, where there will be a project of a new high school, very important in a place like this, where the high school is placed, At the end, they placed the high school where there is no public transport, so not close to the railway, but in another part. So there will be the necessity to reorganize the public transport at the broader scale. At the same time, it is interesting the fact that you can imagine a kind of campus. This is the center of the city, this is an industrial area, and here in the middle there are a series of still open spaces. You can imagine that this cluster of schools with the castle, the old castle that is also along the space, can connect to part of this small city, and also evolving one part of the industrial area more towards this urbanity that is missing today. Is the passage from a small scale town that is going to become a little bit more city, and the high school with the new swimming pool, etc., will be the catalyzers, let's say, of this new project. Altogether, you see here these elements now that are really reconnecting quite vast areas. There is, of course, also the lake as a specific territorial figure, are very, very crucial. And I think that the contemporary city is really demanding this reconnection of territorial and urban scale, recognizing the territory subject, with its characteristic, and working together with this territory. So this is a bit of this reflection on eco-socio-spatial prototypes. So these the three dimensions, they must be there. I think that's the way in which we can think about this socio-ecological transition, where the weak structure of the territory is configured as an opportunity for this ecological, socio-political, and economic testing, this experimental space of the transition. Because my point is that nobody knows what is this transition. No cities in the world, no territories in the world have realized this transition. How can we do it, imagining that we will be good immediately, without any experimentation? So the idea of selecting some part of the territory where you can test those strategies in their multiple dimensions, social, ecological, economic, etc., I think is quite fundamental. Because due to its collective nature, it is a space that represents the general interest. This socio-ecological continuity is a kind of common space. So we propose in Great Geneva to consider that those were the spaces where really to make a clear, systematic test of the transition, which we did a little bit, but not enough. And in the same period, we had the chance. This I like very much, when you start on one point and then you can enlarge or go narrow. We had also in Antwerp some years ago, but now in Geneva. So the city of Geneva. So here we are really the city. Asked me to help them to make their new plan. So AMO is a French assistance à la maîtrise d'ouvrage, means you assist the city in doing the thing, and we did together with them this new plan that is now under the public discussion. And for me the question is, what can do today a city? Now we speak of very global questions, climate change, energy, etc., etc. What can do a city? A small city, because Geneva, I don't know if you have an idea of how many inhabitants, but there are not so many. All Great Geneva is around 1 million. All Great Geneva, so Geneva is around 300,000, something like that. So a small neighborhood of Rio. But you know, Switzerland is 8 million. So you understand a little bit the scale. However, they have a question and problems. It's not that. And the point is, what can do a city in this moment of global transformation? But you have understood that I put a lot of emphasis on the reading of the different territorial figures. Here we have fantastic figures like the lake, the Rhone river, an alpine river, the Arve. You see the two waters. The very blue, transparent water is the Rhone. The very muddy, water is the Alpine River bringing sediments. There is a point where you see the two touch each other, where you see these two colors of water arriving together. The lake with the neighborhood that are really connected to the lake. This mesh that has organized the development of the modern part of Geneva. The railways that were what organized the space of industry. We have to remember that Geneva, that today we think Geneva is just a financial capital or a diplomatic capital, only 50 years ago was an industrial city. There was production, even car production, so really heavy industry. And today there is practically nothing. We organize along those figures, we organize a series of promenade with inhabitants, and that was the exchange about the different aspects. It is interesting that one of the main complaints of the people was about noise in the city. I think in Rio there is a lot to do about the noise in the city. And in fact, noise is becoming more and more something we cannot tolerate anymore. No? And many of the eco or not eco anxiety, etc., are related now to this noise of the city, and it is really emerging as one important problem. Each figure constructs a part of the territory. That's important. You know, the lake has constructed a part of the city. The Rhone, the relation with the Rhone, even the Alpine river that is separated by the city by very high dikes because it's a strong river. So the point is to reconnect the territorial figures to their part of city and to make their presence even more important. So you can imagine, for example, that the lake is already very valorized in Geneva. Not true, because we have the maximum of traffic exactly along the lake. So if you want to free the space, the lake shore to people, you need to revise completely also the mobility. So you also discover things that seems to be evident, but of course the banks of the lake are for public space. No, because we prefer to put access for cars, for example. This mesh is very important because along the lines we have the maximum of traffic in the city. Those are the spaces that people were really complaining, and we could evaluate the number of people that are affected by this noise, which is something like 1/3 of the city, so it's not a marginal part. And again, you have to then revise completely the way with the use of the car, the space of the car, and how you can enter or not enter in Geneva by car, together with the possibility of regeneration of all the facade, all the buildings that are along those axes that are today the most degraded buildings in Geneva. The centralities, the different centralities that are very much also part of the different type of tissues, the modern tissues, more ancient tissues, that design, say, different ways in which shops, services, etc. are organized. The question of the figure of the railways, given the fact that today the industrial city has almost disappeared, Geneva is a city with a 97–98% of economy related to the tertiary sector. So that is clearly, it's so far away that it's almost impossible to come back to a more mixed type of city. Nevertheless, we put the question of maintaining some production in the city as a crucial aspect. And of course, some of the areas along the railways could still be considered as usable for that. At the same time, there are new projects of, say, metropolitan lines. So along the railways, you have also new stations and a new development, because Geneva is a very fast-growing city. So the problem of Geneva is to find space for densification, as well as in the French side. So a lot of densification is happening, which we try to criticize, because the densification is also reducing the open spaces, reducing all the functionalities of the soils, is creating at the end other problems, and that's not really so well working. I know, of course, that when you put the question of the limits, not to densification, someone always is asking, okay, but then you are imagining to close Geneva, that Geneva will not be inclusive. Geneva is not inclusive in any case, with or without the densification. So maybe better to think about the more general problem of being inclusive or not inclusive, and not imagining that just filling the last open spaces would solve the problem of inclusivity, because it's not the case. This idea of maintaining, reinforcing mixed use and the possibility to adapt the urban logistics, etc., etc. And also a work together with the expert, as an environmental expert, about soils, about biodiversity, about water. What is interesting is that we had a study on biodiversity, so it's the intensity of the green is showing where there is more biodiversity, and it's very interesting to see that you can work with these existing conditions. You might reinforce the presence of biodiversity in the city, but also we have, for example, in the Violet, all the polluted soils, very important element. I think that it could be very interesting in Rio to have this kind of polluted soils, the existing biodiversity, the places for water, and the idea of going towards a open air management of rainwater in the city, which means the disconnection from the sewage system and the treatment of all this water in the public space. So this map, complete with the others, a final map about all the structure of public spaces, where the point I want to show you is that you see this pale blue wedges that are entering into the city are the rest of Braillard project of 1 century ago. There are very few of them, so the project has not really been realized. But what is interesting is that, and this is common in many cities in Switzerland, that there is the idea of separation of flows, as you have also a little bit in here. So along the green space you have the pedestrian areas, you have the schools, the crash, etc. So all the traffic is on the yellow lines. That's why the yellow lines are really problematic. This separation of traffic, I think that does not work anymore. We need to reconstitute this public space as a space that can manage different flows, and this would give also to the yellow part the possibility to interact more easily and being part also of the blue areas in one urban space, not one a division of where the cars are, and that's just for the car, and then where the green is, that's just for the people, for the pedestrian, but in one urban space where everybody can find conditions for being there in a safe way, in a good way. So reframing the idea of public space and going beyond this idea of separation of flows that nevertheless is still very strong in our cities. We have overcome this idea in conceptual terms, but when we go concretely into the cities, we see that the idea is still there. And this means, of course, again, revising all the mobility structure, and we were working together with traffic engineers, of course, with some ambitions of the city. The city of Geneva is imagining to erase 10,000 parking spaces in the city, so gaining some space, etc. So to conclude about these weak structures of the transition, I want to refer to an author that is not well known for weakness, but for the opposite, Rem Koolhaas. Rem Koolhaas in the 80s, in this article, the title is already very obvious, Surrender, no? He speaks of considering the open space as backbone of the urban system, as to take urbanism position of weakness as its premise. So urbanism when urbanism decided to concentrate on open space, or what he was calling the project of the ground, the project of the follow, but we are already weak. Great. So I think that this is a very interesting point that we should accept. We work with weak things, and we are weak, we ourselves. So it's a kind of alliance among weaknesses. And I think this is an interesting alliance. The weak structure responds to three fundamental ambitions. So it opens to the radical alteration of the design perspective. That's the first point. Is the alteration, you are so used not to work with the strength, with the strong elements, with what has power. Let's for a moment take a distance and work with the opposite, because a lot remains outside, remains completely excluded. It articulates the value of heterogeneity, so not just a few things, but a lot of different things. Coexistence, marginality. It develops alternative eco-socio-spatial prototypes. And I think this position can help to shape a new substantial action according with the biopolitical nature of the transition. So really grasping, trying to touch this importance of a life. We have a life in common, or life as a common. Now, it's late. So I am just enough. I think that the best is maybe to stop, or just to go through very, very fast on the second chapter, where here the point is we have been working a lot on this idea of horizontality. I already explained in the previous lectures, so I'm not staying too much. But the point is, again, let's remain on this idea of weak. This is a weak territory, not a strong. Wallonia is a kind of marginal part of Northern Europe, like many other marginal parts of Northern Europe. It was a territory of important industrial past. Nothing has remained of that important industrial past. So what is important here, we have lack of jobs, we have big problems of pollution because the industry left thousands of hectares of polluted area where the cost of depolluting is so high that you cannot even think and nothing else. So in this situation, what does it mean to design a horizontal metropolis? So metropolis where the design helps in configuring more equitable kind of relation among territories, among areas, among cities. So here there are 3 points that are very important. The entanglement of urban, socioeconomic and ecological questions. You cannot disconnect them. It's impossible. The marginal and the weak, the lesson we can learn from this, focusing on this. Far from the pressure of attractivity is the opposite of Geneva. Here, not so much attractivity. So the reconsideration of the potential of a non-attractive territory. What you see here is all more or less where the coal was. So it's the strip of coal that was exploited starting from the end of the 19th century, but especially in the 20th century. That was exploited, then things changed. And it touches on one side Germany, on the other side France, with also in France this part. Here we can see better. So all the cities that are along this strip of coal, the black furrow, the sillon noir, and on the left you have, on the west part, you see the Bassin Minier Nord-Pas-de-Calais, so the French part of this coal area. And we have been working since years now. So I like the idea that to work on several themes, on several places. We will speak a little bit in particular of this valley, the Vestre Valley, I will show shortly. So what you have there are rivers, canals, canalized river where you could move goods, a lot of big industrial areas, so you have areas of 50 hectares, 70 hectares, I mean, in a small villages. where there is the possibility to reconnect ecologically what has been disconnected in the past, but also to reuse in the sense of rethinking also new economies, a new part of the city. What is very important is not to look at this as a waste space, which is a little bit not the, we tend not to say, okay, but that's marginal, doesn't matter. No? In fact, first of all, no, this is not waste. No? This is an incredible asset for this territory. Also in terms of infrastructures, you have a canal, you have roads, you have railways. So you are in places where you have so much that is left from the previous cycle of economy. You had important enterprises. So look at this as a kind of lucid machine. It was a machine, the industrial machine, has a certain lucidity, and there is something you can work with. Also very important, this is not available land, because that's the other paradox. People that are coming there just to make a new neighborhood of single-family houses with garden. So they consider these actors like, okay, it's at our disposal because there is no attractivity. But no, this is not available for everything. It's available only for something. So you can reuse this situation. You can, as I was saying before, reconnect ecologically, but you can also look at this system of villages that is the urbanity of today, is not sprawl, the American sprawl, like what happened in the last 20, 30 years. This is there since Middle Age. So there is a kind of appropriation, settlements, not that is part of this history. So we have worked in many different scales. This is an urban project in close to Liège. It was a very beautiful old industry where some of the buildings can be maintained, big hangars will be maintained. Some of the open spaces that are still fertile, we are maintaining as cultivated areas, and then there is the evolution of very small tissues of industries and middle scale, let's say. And I'm very happy because recently I discovered that there is an association that got funded to realize this sort of big garden, a big cultivated garden, on which the University of Liège is imagining to have a new economy related to the production of molecules from plants. And then also the evolution of the use of the big buildings, defining, these are buildings in which you can do whatever you like. They are immense buildings, they have a lot of opportunities, you can work inside them, you can divide, you can use as you want. So this type of incredible projects that are possible thanks to what has remained of the previous industrial cycle. This is another fantastic industrial area. Here we are in Charleroi, that was a little bit the capital of the industrial Belgium in the past. And we are close to the station that has been renamed. It was the West Station, now it has been renamed Central Station. So we are close to the Central Station. And we have a piece of industrial area that is almost 100 hectares, just close to the station, the Central Station. And what is interesting is that you have inside this incredible space 2 steel industries that are still working. So they are like 2 big cathedrals. You enter along the river, there is the canal arriving from Brussels, Antwerp, Brussels arriving there, so you have a very special point. But also you have steel industry, so really hard industry, heavy industry working. And you can imagine to transform these areas, first of all, reconnecting with the station is just a few hundreds meters. You can reuse what you have there. It doesn't matter if it is concrete. Let's use the concrete, because if you take out the concrete, you have to depollute, and there is not the money to depollute. So let's have a park made of concrete. There are important icons of the industrial past that are very dear to the people. People live, let's say, with this memory of what was the industrial Charleroi, so you can use it. All these things are not evident. We had to fight to say, hey, let's maintain this heritage, because in the mind of the region, of the Wallonia region, the idea was, okay, we have another one in Liège, so we don't need two in the region, in the Walloon region. No, but the people of Charleroi, they want to have their own, so you have to live to do that. You have a beautiful bricks building where you can imagine to have new clusters for small, medium enterprises. Eventually, you can also add some new buildings, but first of all, you have to fill what you have. And you have already a metro line that is passing there. This is the abundance of infrastructures that characterize this area. So you have already a metro there, so you can access in a very easy way. Okay, then there is this case, but I think I have not the time. This is a very important work. It's the work of my last year. No, so now it's 2 years ago, but let's say we concluded 2023, and it's not totally concluded. The case is a valley in which a very big flood had big damage, created big damages. And here you see is the human chain that was realized in 2022, May, just as a way to remember what happened. So it's interesting what a Flemish, you know maybe a little bit about the conflict between the Flemish and the Walloon people. I don't know if you know anything about that, but there is a little bit of tension there. But the Flemish people, they really came to help. Why they came, that could be explained, but okay, I have not the time. Sorry, what is saying this person? Is a volunteer, no? That came to help. He said, I come from Ghent. We came here every weekend with a bus. If in 20 years the sea will cover us, the Flemish, we hope that the Walloon will come to help us too. It's very interesting because it immediately put the question of solidarity as a crucial aspect of this story. And this is a small model, physical model, because we like to work also very physically, to understand how it is complicated, what we call a valley in the center with some affluent and then plateau that are not very regular, they're very moved. What happened here? But the water occupied its space, not more than that. So the space that is the bottom of the valley, the flood plain, is called flood plain. Why? Because the water can use it. And this is what happened. Unfortunately, in the flood plain, there are cities, industries, people that are living, because the big part of the urbanization that was together with the first cycle of industrialization, that was one of the first region that got industrialized in Belgium, was along the river, because they were using the water, of course, for textile industry, etc. And then the second wave of urbanization, on the contrary, is on the plateau, on the higher part. But also, this has very important consequences. So some pictures of the situation. So the river, the river is not just a river, it's also a stream. So there are moments in which it has a lot of strength. And that was the case. It arrived and it really destroyed houses, destroyed walls, used thousands of cars as kind of shooting the cars against the walls, against the housing. I saw really a lot of those cars that were an incredible spectacle. And you see now these people, nevertheless, they are smiling. So this is a photographer that did this kind of survey during the day of the disaster, and you see something that is speaking of what do we do when we are inside the catastrophe, let's say. So now the expert, the climatologists, they say, we were working with the University of Liège, we had all the possible experts. The climatologists, they say that there will be probably other 2-3 episodes at the same time from now to 2050. After 2050, there will be drought. So maybe much less episodes of this type, but the drought will be the problem, fires and not water for agriculture, etc. Here, all the territory, all the landscape has to participate to this aspect. I mean, each single square centimeters can do something for that. Can maintain the water, can collect the water, can redistribute the water. Every single part following, if you go for a certain agriculture that is really more similar to the one of the past, where there were a lot of fruit trees, a lot of roots that are blocking the soil that is eroded, the fertile soil. So you have to imagine that each part of the territory can give a contribution, and this is also bringing to another type of agriculture, to another type of presence of vegetation. Just to remember that Victor Hugo, so the great French writer, wrote that this was the most beautiful valley he had ever seen. And sometimes you have an incision, sometimes you have a garden, always a paradise. That was Victor Hugo passing in the valley, but the valley is fantastic, it's still very beautiful. Of course, there is a social aspect, social and spatial injustice. The poorest are closer to the water, so the bottom of the valley or the poorest part of the population. These are people, many people without jobs, because the decline, the industrial decline is there since decades, not years, decades. So also the new immigration is poorer and poorer, so it's really the poor part of the valley. And this means that you have to really start a dialogue on solidarity. So the question of solidarity, for me, became very clearly a question of resilience. I think, I'm convinced that you cannot speak of resilience without solidarity. There is no resilience possible without mechanisms of solidarity. In the case of the water, this is very clear, because the upstream and the downstream, they organize solidarity. The problems in the downstream are caused mainly by the upstream. So the upstream, the people living on the plateau, they didn't realize immediately what was happening in the lower part of the valley. It was summer. They were with the swimming pool, with their things. They didn't understand. The Flemish arrived before to help the people in the lower part. But then the municipalities, the cities on the plateau, they started to understand that they were partially responsible because of the impermeabilization of the soil, because of the runoff is going down into the lower part of the valley. So this mechanism of solidarity is very clear when you speak of water. And I think that you have to imagine that in other also domains, we should arrive to this kind of clarity, no? You are responsible, not the one that is suffering the most. If you extend this kind of reflection to other topics, I think that you can understand how the resilience becomes a very political or biopolitical topic. And for us it was also important to bring this subject, the territory, the river subject, into the debate. When we discussed, and this was a very important moment, we discussed with groups of citizens the different possible scenarios. We opposed two couples. The first is, but let's continue as in the past, where we do nothing. The climatologist already told you will have several new episodes, so let's reflect on this. And the second is, let's give a place, a space to the river to express what the river wants is space. So what the river wants. At the beginning it was not easy to bring this in a public meeting where you have people that have been hit by the catastrophe and telling them, okay, let's listen to the river now for a moment. And they started by saying, okay, well, you want a ghost valley where all population will be evacuated. No, of course, that's not the point. But you have to understand that the river is there together with you. If you are denying the river as a subject, but you will suffer from the river, strength. From the river is stronger than us. Whatever dikes you want to do, the river will destroy the dike, will make something different. So at the end, it was very crucial and important moment of discussion, where people, someone say, okay, but in any case, nature will take its rights. Exactly. Someone being more prudent, okay, but then what are we doing if the river is taking some space? But the question is, can we construct a coexistence between a river that has a certain behavior? It's not a calm river, it's a river that can become very, very violent. We have simply to understand the way in which the river behaves. And then the second axis is more about the type of urbanization, with the attempt to discipline urbanization inside certain corridors, but then urbanization is going a little bit everywhere. And on the contrary, the idea of really understanding the forms of urbanization that are scattered, they are not linear, they're not simple, and work in the regeneration of those forms. This just to give you a little bit the idea of the complexity of the work. There was also a responsibility of the planification. So a lot of areas that are still buildable inside risky areas. That's a very big question, because the citizens, they have the right to build, but in fact they are building inside risky, so the risk will be even higher than it is today. So that's a very big political discussion. We stayed on site a lot, so we were really realizing maps with the citizens, trying to understand the different questions. We had to also study better the quality of the landscape. So these are the permanence, some of the permanence maps where we put all the different themes that were discussed staying on site together with the municipalities, but together also with a group of citizens, individual citizens. And maps of the different types of landscapes that for us was important, because the territory is also part of the solution. And then a series of strategies that I have not the time now to illustrate. In the discussion with the hydraulic engineers, the question of enlarging some part of the banks, rethinking some of the buildings that are really into the river, because they were textile industries that will work with the water, but also going up to the industrial areas, to the more recent urbanization, and say, you have to solve the problem. You cannot reject your waters into the lower part. And this maybe is an occasion to rethink also the industrial area. Instead of just a monofunctional area, can become something different, and then altogether bringing a series of images of what is changing. The territory, for example, here is a forest, but this forest is not a natural forest. Has been planted, has been the territory, the soil has been drained. This is causing today this as a kind of asphalt surface. So the point is to come back to the peats ground that existed before, and there are already some projects from the EU, funded from the EU, to reintroduce the peat areas that have also a possibility of becoming a sponge soil, and this could be very also important, because all these thousands of hectares of forest just sent the waters really like an asphalt surface towards the lower part of the. Now we are at the point in which all these things we have concluded. However, we are not satisfied, because we understand, I understand that we are not ready for this. We are not yet ready, even after catastrophe. We have not understood that there are things that must change. So we are thinking what to do. There are three main themes for us that are important. The question of updating our culture of the built, so the Baukultur, in function of this socio-ecological transition. We will build the city in a different way, we will build infrastructure in a different way, etc. Land policies, however, this old traditional theme of planification, there is a question also of how you can take out the rights to build. And the third, the risk culture, to be used to understand that we are inside a risky situation, that the possibility to avoid risk does not exist, So the old myth of giving safety to everyone, everybody, again in the modern city, modern urbanism, now we have understood that it's not possible. So we are proposing here to go towards another type of urbanism that many of you know, so more a kind of associative, collaborative, spontaneous type of working together, because I think that the policy or the political bodies are not ready. Society sometimes seems to be better equipped sometimes, but I don't know where we will get, but for sure it's a big question. Now I really close, just showed you some pictures of two small projects, because I've been speaking a lot of larger scale. So just to clarify that when I speak of a larger scale, I always think at different scales. These are two recent projects just realized in Brussels, two public spaces. One is in Saint-Gilles, one part of Brussels. It was a mineral area with some trees inside the center of the city, close to one area where that is a very important centrality. It's called the Parvis of Saint-Gilles, and there you have a lot of cafes, restaurants, a lot of young people, etc., etc. The first thing we did was to demineralize, reuse part of the existing materials, maintaining, of course, the trees. It's just a sloping terrain, and we reorganized the water management, and this is the kind of the space where a lot of different practices are happening. There you see the Parvis, this curve is a very strong centrality. It is also centrality related to consumption. So if you want to sit, you have to buy a beer at least. Why we wanted this space to be a place where everybody can stay without consuming, or if they want to consume, they bring something from there. And we wanted to have kids, teenagers, elderly people. I mean, it's really kind of neighborhood scale together with a metropolitan scale that goes, they go together. The reuse of the different materials. We start from the lower part, that is the continuation of the Parvis. Here there is also a market that is done, or small food cars that are also there. And then going towards the slope, this becomes greener and greener, and we made these small objects. And I'm very happy that they now start to be used after some months of opening of the park, and there is music, things can do what they want, they are open. And then going towards the interior, it's quite equipped so that you can have a picnic, you can stay there, you can eat. And going through, it becomes greener and greener with a series of small playgrounds for kids. And then it becomes really kind of green space for very shadowed for the hot summer. And then at the end, touching the avenue again, it becomes a little more hard with small equipment. The sport area was already existing, so we have just requalified it. And then this small buildings, this small kiosk where people can sit, and the idea is that, of course, teenagers maybe will use it to look towards the sport activities. So it's a very small project, but it has been considered one of the first projects taking really the question of climate change adaptation seriously, and revising the way in which a public space could be designed. Here you see with the snow. It is very, very useful also during the cold days, and at the same time with very strong social presence, and really also thanks to the listening of the neighborhood, the people living there, we got to this result that for the moment is very functioning very well. The second project, of which we have only concluded one part, is always in Belgium, is in Tournai. And here it was quite complicated because we have different actors, the railway people that are very, very strong, the city, but also the roads, and also the bus station. For the moment, what has been realized is just this Rue Royale, the Royal Street, and the part of the park until the station. The problem we had here is that this space was absolutely unusable. It was really appropriated only by people with drug problems, alcohol, etc. So nobody was passing there. People were only staying on one side, not on the other side, just there because it was out of control, let's say. And of course, when you arrive at the station, you entering in a city, passing through this type of space, you are not very well impressed about the city. So our problem was, but our project, what is going to do here? Is it transforming? In which sense? And these people, where are they going if they are not here? No, because you can push them somewhere else. And we understood by doing a very long survey that the people were there, those people were there, because all the services related to them, where you can take a shower, where you can take some food, where you have you know, what is given instead of the drug for people that are, is all there. And we could not, of course, imagine to move all those services. So we also understood that our space had to be a space also for them, but also for the others, not only for them. So we had to work a little bit on this idea of giving a little bit more of a transparency. There was a piece of a small 19th century park that had to become more clearly part of the flows, so from the station towards the center of the city, but nevertheless with benches, with spaces where these people can stay, and that's not a problem. If everybody can stay there, this will not be a problem. We had, of course, trees to be maintained. We could enlarge this park to the facade of the station that had just been renovated, to the facade on the other side, so the park took another dimension. And when you arrive now, you really pass through it and you see the cathedral, and it's a very, it's very appealing. So you like the idea to pass there. It's not a place that you want. And of course, you see people, different types of people that are there sitting or waiting. There is an incredible cathedral with 4 towers, very, very beautiful. So that's the idea of this Rue Royale. That was the place where the horrible commerce, really the poorest commerce, or many shops were closed, so in complete abandon. And this is the other side towards the station. We work with the artists, both for the 2 rabbits that are really the symbol of the city, and they are playable for kids, so the idea is that we can use them. And then we had also some other small interventions, like this one, with a French artist reusing the stone, the curb stones that we didn't use anymore because we flattened all the streets and sidewalks, so there is no denivellation, so we could reuse all these beautiful blue stones. It is a special stone from Tournai. This artist is called Ali, but he's not from Morocco, but he's from Brittany, but he has this name. And he's working with us also in other projects. I think I like very much this very small intervention, but that give certain value. We had to restore the small kiosk that was there. And at the opening, that was a few weeks ago, the Royal Street finally was without cars, without parkings. And people were so astonished to see this space. No? Nobody had seen this space. It's not like in Rio where every Sunday you can free. No? Here the people were not used, and the politicians, they asked the people from the shops to do something outside, not to occupy this outside. And there were nice moments. And what is important is that nobody could imagine that. And also for them it was already, and also for us, I have to say, because we said we designed the parking space with the same quality as if it was the best. So that one day you will understand that it's better to have maybe some chairs or tables outside instead of all the cars to use the shops. And in fact, that was finally very, very visible and very, very clear. Okay, now I'm really at the end. So the biopolitical garden. The project I show, our projects, are just a moment of reflection, and of course there is no pretension of saying that's not the... But I think that they first of all show that there is a true and quite a deep biopolitical issue. Each one of them integrate this biopolitical issue. That is the risk, the catastrophe, the rain, the water question, or the social aspect. I mean, we are really speaking of life and of forms of life, and you have to think about the responsibility you take with your project about those lives. No? That's not a small aspect. The title, the garden, the biopolitical garden, is putting together a very soft term, garden, where you think about taking care of the plants or taking care of kids, no? The garden, educating them, separating them from other. No? You distinguish the good plants from the bad plants. So it's very soft, but can be also very cruel. The garden is not. And biopolitics. No? You put together two terms. Biopolitics is really speaking of power, and the garden is more about care. So, but in fact, the tension among the two is for me, is very fruitful. It's very interesting. Knowing that the garden metaphor has a long history, no? Inside the biopolitical thinking. Bauman underlined this very clear when he speaks of the garden as being the space that is designed for the care of people, where you separate from what can harm them, watching over their purity and safety. So it is a very strong, metaphor. But a garden is also a place of variety, ambivalence, ambiguity, heterogeneity, and mixing. In the gardens, you can really work on putting together things, in contrast to the thought of separation, selection, and homogeneity. And space and design, so that's the title of this lecture, Laboratories, no? Of the transition. Space and design can be fundamental agents of this social and ecological transition. But, there is a but. I think that we need to redefine the commitment of design in broader biopolitical terms, so that we cannot evacuate this problem or this question, and it has to be redefined. And when I speak of coexistence, I think about human and human, so the territorial subject that is really changing completely our our priorities, but also, of course, humans, among humans. Emancipation, spatial and environmental justice. Cities and territories could be laboratories of social and ecological change, and projects can prove that alternatives are possible. Projects can prove that. Thank you very much.